Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new, welcome to the channel. Now today I thought we'd have a bit of a talk about what's it like living in Japan. There's so many videos on YouTube about, living in Japan, what's it really like, and so many people are disappointed with living here and all this sort of nonsense, If you're not happy living here, pack up and go back to where you come from. That's pretty simple, like I don't mind living here. I've been here for 28 years, I've got no real complaints. So I think it depends on what you expect from living here. A lot of people say, they treat me like a foreigner, they don't treat me like Japanese. Well, you're not Japanese, you are a foreigner. You're always going to be treated as a foreigner. But you can try to fit in. And I think a lot of people don't try to fit in with the community. And it's very important in Japan, fitting in, working in groups. They're taught this in schools, in elementary schools and junior high schools and that. They have to do things together and work together and solve problems. Japanese is a very group-based working system. Very few work by themselves. A lot is all done in a group. They have so many meetings, this sort of thing. That's just how they're brought up and how they're taught. It's same as they do like club activities at school, they play sports and all this. It's to help them build this working together. That's the whole idea of it, is to work together. So, this is just what it's like living in Japan. You have to do things. You have to work with the community. Now, I don't know about living in a city. I've never lived in a city. I never want to live in a city, in Japan. I've always lived in the country. So I've never lived in an apartment either. I've always had a house. I couldn't stand living in an apartment. The apartments here are like little shoeboxes. They're tiny. And I like a bit of space. I like to be able to go outside and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I've never lived in an apartment and I never will. But, apartments here aren't quite cheap, actually, compared to other countries and that. Renting here is cheap compared to other countries. So, things like that are pretty good. But, I live in the country, so there are certain things you have to do living in the country. I've lived in this area with this house for 18 years. 19 years. So I know all the... they call it a hun. It's like your neighbourhood. So in my neighbourhood area, there are 13 houses. So every year a different house, someone from that house has to be the area leader. So you have to go to meetings, you have to organise the different things like cleaning the river and putting up the flag for the festival and cleaning the shrine and community centre, things like this. It's just a part and parcel. You have to do it. I've done it twice since I've been here. So it's not a lot of fun, but it's something you have to do. And everybody does it. So, you just suck it up and do it. Community days and that, when you have to go clean the river and that sort of thing. Nobody wants to do it, but everyone just goes and does it. So, no use whinging about it. You just go do it. And once you get finished, you're finished. Things like this. So I have no real problem in the area here. All the neighbours are friendly. They all talk to me and different things. If I go for a bit of a walk and I see someone, I always, say hello to them and different things. Sometimes I'll stop and have a bit of a chat with someone. And so I get on pretty well in the area. But you have to try to fit in. I think some people who come to Japan, they think they're different, so they want to stand out. They don't want to conform. They just want to be different. I'm a foreigner. blah, 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 and they just want to be different. They don't fit in. I think that's the big problem why they have a hard time in Japan. I think if you try to fit in, it's not difficult living here. It's the people who don't want to conform are the ones who are complaining it's so hard living here and that. It might be in the big cities like Tokyo and Osaka and Nagoya. I don't know. I've never lived there, but it could be different living in a big apartment block. It might be a bit of a headache. I'm not really sure. But I think that is the big thing. You just have to try to fit in. And once you do that and accept it. Now, some things in Japan just don't make sense. Like, and this, like, for instance, like in Australia, if you go to the doctor and you're not real happy with what he says, you can go get a second opinion. In Japan, second opinions here mean nothing. Like, my wife has a autoimmune disease and she's been pretty crook, really crook actually. And, there's a GoFundMe page on my channel there. If you want to have a look at what she's like, have a look at that. It'll pretty well shock you. Anyway, she's been going to this big hospital and she'd been getting worse and worse and the doctors hadn't been doing much and that sort of thing. So we found another doctor who sort of specialised in this sort of disease and the symptoms she was having. And we went to see him, and because we'd been going to another doctor, like at the hospital, he didn't want to touch her. He said, I can't really give you any medicines or, take you on because you've been going here. You have to go back to them. So that sort of pretty well sucks, like they won't contradict each other. It's real. Because if we had gone to see him first off, he probably could have done something. Because we didn't see him first off, he didn't really want to do anything about it. So this sort of is one thing that sort of happens in Japan. What else? They do some funny things that just really don't make sense, but that's just the way it is. And you're not going to change it. It's just how Japan is. Yeah, working in Japan can be pretty tough. Like, a lot of people teach English, which is it was better than it is now. Things have changed a lot over the time I've been here. When I first come here, the money was pretty good and conditions were pretty good. They use a lot of dispatch companies and they sort of hire out teachers to different places. And they've got more and more dispatch companies, and they sort of pay less and treat the people worse than they used to. So it's not real good. If you work full time for a full-on Japanese company, the working conditions are pretty tough. They sort of will treat you like you are Japanese. You work long hours. It's pretty tough work. They don't have a real lot of time off. Like in Australia, you get 20 holidays a year plus sick leave. Here, a lot of companies will sort of give you, for the first year, you get 10 days, and then every year after that, you get an extra day. But you can't just have 10 days off in one hit. They won't do it. You'll probably get a couple of days off at a time and this sort of thing. It's a lot harder to have time off work and things like that. Working for companies is pretty tough in Japan. It is pretty hard work. What else? Healthcare here is pretty good. You just pay a certain percent of your wage, your salary goes into healthcare. When you go to the doctor, 70% is paid by the government. You pay 30%. That works with dentists and that too. So if you go to the dentist, you only pay 30%. But dentists here, they don't like to do a real lot in one go. You might go you've got a hole in your tooth. You might have to go 5 or 6 times to get that hole fixed. And half the time they drill out half your tooth and put these big caps in. I'm not real fond of the dentists here, but that's just part and parcel of it. I got more metal in my mouth than you can poke a stick at. I think I'll have a hard time if I ever go through a metal detector at an airport. But on the whole, it's pretty decent living in Japan. You don't have a real lot of problems. It's very safe. I think it used to be a lot better than it is now. You could leave a restaurant or something and leave your wallet on the table, and you realise you've forgotten your wallet. You go back and it's still sitting on the table. Nobody would touch it. Things like that. Very little theft. So that sort of thing. But there has been a little bit more of theft going on lately. I know a bonsai place, and they had some bonsai stolen from there. And it ended up, they caught the people who stole them. Because these bonsai were very well documented, there was a lot of photos and different things of his bonsai. They found them, and the ringleader of the thing was Chinese, and the people who were stealing them were Vietnamese. They were actually language students. So they probably need some extra money, so they're out stealing the bonsai. But they ended up getting caught. So, on the whole, you don't really have any real dramas in Japan if you try to fit in. That is the main thing. You have to try to fit in. If you want to stand out, yeah, you're not going to have a real good time here. But if you try to fit in, I think you'll have a good time, and they're not going to treat you like you're Japanese because you aren't Japanese, so just get that out of your head straight away, and you'll be okay. But if you try to communicate with people, I go for walks around the neighbourhood. There's, if I see someone on the street, I'll have a bit of a talk with them. And it's fine, you don't have a real big problem. Anyway, they've rambled on a little bit here towards the end. But anyway, I hope that gives you a bit of an idea on what it's like living in Japan. But I don't mind it. I think it's quite good. I'm going to go back to Australia for a bit of a visit, probably the end of the year or beginning of next year. I think I'm going to be in for a real big culture shock going back there. I think it's going to be really a real eye-opener going back to Australia and what's happening in Australia at the moment. Anyway, that's all for now. I hope you have a good one. Till next time, that's all for now.